Hello and welcome to another spoiler movie review here at World of Stew. And today we are going to be taking a look at the latest movie to be adapted from the work of none other than the greatest horror movie writer. No, not horror movie writer, that would be nonsense. Horror novelist of all time. Arguably, there are other people that would say maybe Edgar Allan Poe. But we're talking about Stephen King. 2017 is a massive year for Stephen King fans because there is currently on Netflix the TV series adaptation of The Mist, which was an awesome film a few years ago starring Thomas Jane. There is also a TV series of the Stephen King story Mr. Mercedes, as well as the reboot of Stephen King's It, which is hitting cinemas soon. A lot of people are a bit concerned about that because obviously Tim Curry as Pennywise is iconic in the role, so we're going to have to wait and see what happens with the new version of It. Did it need a reboot? Probably not. But in this case, we are going to be talking about a new Stephen King movie based on work that hasn't been adapted before, and it is, of course, The Dark Tower. Now, I'm going to start this off by confessing that I've never read any of the Dark Tower books. To be honest, I don't read anywhere near as much as I should in my adult life, unless it's comic books or graphic novels, and I read an absolute ton. But I used to read Stephen King back in the day. I read The Stand, Carrie, The Shining, all of which, of course, have been turned into either TV movies or theatrical releases, all to sort of varying degrees of success. Of course, I am, of course, talking about Kubrick's Shining being very good as opposed to King's own Shining, which was on TV, which was terrible. But we're not here to talk about the history of Stephen King. We're here to talk about The Dark Tower. Now, whilst I haven't read the Dark Tower books, my wife has, and she is a huge fan of all Stephen King's work, and she loves the Dark Tower series. Now, I believe there's 8 books. Now, in terms of the actual storyline of the Dark Tower, it's my understanding from what my wife has told me, and to be honest, I do shut off sometimes. Just don't tell her. The Dark Tower tells the basic story of a young boy named Jake who has to go to a dark tower, a big tower in another world. I believe it's called Midworld, and he has to do some stuff to stop the man in black, who in this is called Walter, but is more famously known as Randall Flagg in The Stand, if you've ever watched The Stand or read The Stand. Across the course of the 8 books and his journey, it takes in many, if not all, of Stephen King's previous novels and work, and it has characters in it. It has Jake turns out to have the shining in it, or he can shine, as they say. It goes, and even Stephen King features as Stephen King in his own book, and sort of like the ultimate meta crossover shenanigans, whatever you want to call it. So it's 8 novels, and each book is absolutely huge. And it took Stephen King decades and decades to write. So obviously he was writing this Dark Tower work as he was doing other books as well. So it's kind of like his magnus opus. It's his ultimate sort of journey through the mind of Stephen King. So they decided to adapt it into a movie. Now, bearing in mind, it is 8 absolutely massive books. They have turned it into one film. Now, I think they were planning to have a series of films, but that's probably not going to happen. We'll get to the reason why shortly. And they turned it into an 95-minute long film. Now, quite how you're supposed to transfer 8 massive novels into one 95-minute movie, I don't know. But following the movie's release and people complaining about how it's cherry picking stuff, they're basically saying that the movie, so going back, the basic plot of the novel story is that once Jake has completed his journey to the Dark Tower, he will do whatever he has to do, and then he has to do the whole thing over again. So the makers of this film are arguing that their version of the story is the second go around for Jake after he's done it in the novels. So they can basically take the story, and it's a bit like the One in the Matrix, where it's just goes round and round and round until Neo obviously makes a different decision and changes everything. So Jake goes round and round, circular, living his life, doing this thing. So the makers have taken artistic license, shall we say, in saying that their movie is about Jake's next journey after the journey in the books. But it's similar to the journey in the books because he does the same thing over and over again. If you follow that, then congratulations. So we start off with, and I watched this film with my wife, who is a huge fan, and right from the get-go, she was not a happy bunny. Because we start off with this, there's this place in Midworld, oh, nearly lost the camera then. There's this place in Midworld where Randall Flagg is using the power from children to try and destroy the Dark Tower. Now this upset my wife because apparently this doesn't appear till well into the series, so sort of like book 5, book 6. There'll be experts out there who know the story off by heart and they'll be able to tell me more about that. But it starts off basically more than 50% of the way through the story with these kids channeling their power to try and destroy the Dark Tower. We then jump to the real world, our world, where we meet Jake, who of course is a troubled child, aren't they always? And he's having all these visions and these dreams of the man in black, Walter, but I'm not going to call him Walter, I'm going to call him Randall Flagg, because as far as I'm concerned, he is Randall Flagg, and Randall Flagg is a much better name than Walter. Although technically I guess I should call him Walter because that's his name in this film. The man in black, Walter, Randall, he's played by Matthew McConaughey, and the gunslinger, who is the main protagonist, sort of like the hero who's fighting against Walter, Randall, is played by Idris Elba. So two really good actors here. So you're thinking this movie could be pretty decent. So we meet Jake and he's having these visions of these vampires and these people who their skin comes off their faces and they all work for Randall Flagg to get children, to take them to Midworld so that he can just try and destroy the Dark Tower. And they try and take Jake. But Jake obviously escapes. He goes through a portal into Midworld where he meets... Roland is Idris Elba's gunslinger character. And they basically go on a journey where they together are going to try and stop the man in black. This involves them going into the real world, coming back to our world, and then finding another... And see, this was the first sort of part of this movie that really irritated me, and I was going into it completely neutral, not having read any of the books, but they go to this little village, and the village says, yes, we've got a portal. So Roland, Idris Elba's character, he says, well, I need to go to this place where Randall Flagg is using these children. And they're like, well, we can't do that because they're monitoring our usage of the portal. So what we'll do is we'll send you to Jake's Earth, and then you'll need to find another portal there so that you can go to where Randall Flagg is. But in firing up their portal anyway, this attracts the attention of Randall Flagg and his peeps, and they turn up and start killing and murderizing people and trying to burn the place down. So, if that's the case, why did they not just use their portal to send him to the Randall Flagg place in the first place? Because it would have made no difference, because they would have been tracked regardless. So that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And it was just kind of like, that's rubbish. Speaking of being in the real world, Randall Flagg, Walter, he turns up in our world, and he's got this power where he can just walk past people. For instance, there's this girl eating her ice cream, sat on a bench with her mum, and he just goes, hate. And the girl goes from happy as a pig in you-know-what to full of hatred, and she just stares at her mum and goes, I hate you now, mummy. And apparently that doesn't happen in the books, so that really upset my wife as well. She said that was complete horse shit. So they go to the real world, and then Randall Flagg gets his... Sorry, I've got to stop calling him Randall Flagg. Walter gets his hands on Jake. He takes Jake back to Midworld, where he plugs him into the machine because he can shine. And I don't mean take that shine either, for you English fans out there. and he's going to use his power to destroy the tower. There's this big gun battle between like Roland and Walter's minions, and he basically kicks the crap out of all of them. It looked really good in the trailer, but to be honest, when it was happening, I just kept thinking, I've seen so many more gun battles that are better than this, and in particular, the one in Desperado, Robert Rodriguez's follow-up to El Mariachi, starring, of course, Antonio Banderas. If you want to watch a good gunfight, go and watch that film. It is immense. And then, of course, there's the big battle between Walter and Roland ends up killing Walter by shooting him in the head. And that's the end of that. And he frees Jake, and Jake's parents are all dead, so he can't go back home. So he's going to go off on his merry adventures with Roland. Now, this again really, really annoyed my wife, because obviously Walter is the main protagonist in all 8 novels. He's like the lingering shadow over all 8 novels, but here they've killed him off pretty much straight away. But does that mean he's dead? I'm guessing probably not, because they intended to make more of these films. Unfortunately, this movie cost $60 million to make, which is quite cheap in today's age. But globally, it has only taken $73 million worldwide, which means it's basically tanked. It's made Sony a massive loss, because you basically have to double the budget for marketing and all the rest of it, so they're well out of pocket on this film. And Sony Pictures are not having a good time at the moment. Ghostbusters. So they had a lot of hope for the future riding on this film, and it just hasn't worked out, I'm afraid, because even looking at this film as a neutral, which I was doing because I've not read the books, as I've already said, it was just boring. There was just nothing to it, and you could see where the story was going, and it just went from one point to another. It was just boring, to be honest. And I can understand if you've taken the time to read all 8 books and waited years and years and years for all these books to come out, and then you've read them, you would be completely pissed off with what they've done in this film. So will there be any more? I suppose it all depends on how Sony's Spider-Verse goes with Venom and Black Cat and Silver Sable and all the rest of it. But based on the box office performance of this one, I would guess probably not. And the thing is as well, with this film, and I'm sure if you look at it statistically, they're on screen quite a lot, but it just felt like McConaughey and Elba weren't on screen all that much to me. But maybe I'm being overcritical there, I don't know. But The Dark Tower, again, I was looking forward to watching it as maybe a huge blockbuster. I've been let down so many times already this year. I can't give it more than a 5, and I'd possibly even give it a 4. Visually, it was good, but storytelling-wise, it was just poor. And I have no real inclination to go and watch it again. So that was another spoiler movie review. Of course, you can just put your comments down there if you've got anything to say. Did you like this film, or am I completely wrong? You can tell me more about the plot of the Dark Tower novels if you've read them. And I'll be back soon, because obviously we've got the Justice League coming up. Really looking forward to that one. And then Thor Ragnarok, all coming up in the next couple of months. And my next film I'm going to watch is, again, a Stephen King adaptation. It's the new version of It. So we'll wait and see how that one is compared to this. Let's be honest, can't be any worse. Anyway, until next time, keep it geek.